Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share what I got to know about legal technology and transformation of legal services over the course of my career. Just to give you a slight background, I joined Baker McKenzie back in 2017. Before that, I graduated law school back in 2014. And January of this year, 2022, I joined legal tech, and now you might see that as a transition from a person practicing law into legal technology. And I would like to share with you the findings and what happened to me on the road, and hopefully through the documents and resources I present over the course of this presentation, hopefully these readings will help you find the career that you want. And if you are interested in this, hopefully this will give you the guidance you need to be better at this. The title of this presentation is Introduction to Legal Tech and Transformation of Legal Services. As such, we will be covering a large area. And as far as I understand, I will not be able to take questions at the end of this, but if you could email your questions or put it in the chat, I will be very glad to get back to you on these questions. So just to start with, what is legal tech? Legal tech, there are a number of different definitions to it. There are a number of different factors associated to legal tech. But if we wanted to take a simplistic approach to it, there is no need for expensive systems or artificial intelligence to do something that generates incredible efficiencies at legal industry. If we think about what can be legal tech, it's basically doing different things. So that would be investing, like creating new product lines or new services, or doing things differently, which would be taking something that we do every day, but tweaking it in a way that it generates a lot of more efficiencies and cost savings for both the client and the firm. And the third one about legal tech, I would say, and this would be the most important one, is it's all about asking the correct questions, because it's very easy to what we call in the business failing successfully, which is to say you get to your aims, you get to your target in the end of you succeed in your purpose, but you did not align, you did not think about firm strategy, or you did not think about how the users would use this, and you created a solution to a problem that nobody had, or you created a solution but nobody wants to use it, which are two common themes that we see all the time in the industry. And it's always good to take a step back and think about, why are we talking about legal tech at this period in time? It can be boiled down into downward shift in the cost curve, basically. And what we mean by that is there's a lot of legal technology being adopted across major firms and across a lot of geographies. This creates an inherent pressure on literally every single law firm in the global competition to invest more into legal tech. There's also increased offshoring and nearshoring arrangements being done, which means that, for example, if you had an office in London, it would make sense to have another office, preferably within the same time zone, that would support lawyers working out of London office in a place that wouldn't have high costs associated to it, so that you could provide legal work at a much lower cost. And also the third major driving force behind legal technology is there are now, we are called a law firm, but there are law companies now active in this space. whereas a law firm is and traditionally has been owned and controlled by partners, which is what happens. So you join a firm, you become a trainee, and then over the years you become a junior associate, mid-level associate, senior associate, and then partner. Obviously, this is different than in every jurisdiction, and partners would perhaps own a part of the firm in general, and they would be taking part in decision-making processes. But with the law companies coming in, it's actually very capital-based oriented thinking and decision-making, which is in that context, you don't necessarily need all these senior lawyers taking part in certain processes, which is all cutting down into the cost of providing legal advice. And these are the reasons why a lot of you would see a lot of people talk about legal tech a lot more often these days. So that now that we have an idea about why legal tech is being discussed today, and we have some inkling about what it might be, what legal tech is, it's always good to go back and ask a question. And Simon Sinek has a book called Start With Why. It's a good book, but the whole premise is just that, just start asking why to a problem until you really, really understand it. So just to go back a slide, what is the purpose of legal services is actually at the core of legal tech and how it's being applied in the legal industry. If you think about it, there are, as law students, hopefully in the future, you might qualify and become a lawyer, and you know, one of the practice groups that you will or probably be working in, they will either be transactional, litigation, compliance, or regulatory. There are obviously different practice groups that I didn't take here, but these would be, you know, generally the more popular ones. A transactional practice group would be M&A, banking and finance. Litigation would be dispute resolution, arbitration, and a good old courtroom litigation. Compliance would be internal and external investigations, and regulatory would be, you know, competition, tax, IP, IT in certain ways. So just to take a step back and ask, why do we exist? Why do we practice these transaction or litigation or compliance or regulatory practice groups? If you keep on asking questions about why we do things in the way that we do them, a transaction actually, it's a way for firms to help price risk and help understand what they are actually buying or selling. So you're actually reducing information asymmetries happening between different stakeholders. With litigation, you're actually trying to characterize risk or exposure, and then you're trying to shift the expected value of the lawsuit to the counterparty. With compliance, you are trying to mitigate and identify rogue behavior as it comes up within a firm or within a population. With regulatory, you are trying to identify or predict regulatory decisions so that you can actually help your client assume a, you know, better strategic position. So if you think about it, none of it has any human element to it. There is no lawyer. There is no lawyer connected to this. All we need is legal services and, in the sense, lawyering, but the human element of it is actually not necessarily a quintessential part of what we do. It's, for example, when you are doing transactional legal services, what you're actually doing is reviewing documents, draft documents, and go to meetings and try to alleviate some of the information asymmetries that happened or that are already existing within, between the parties. So in the end of the day, you are trying to find if there's a risk, and then you are trying to quantify it in the sense that, you know, when it's an M&A transaction, it's going to be affecting how much money is paid out to buy or you know, to buy a company, or when it's establishing a JV, it will be about having a good balance between parties. So if we look at all of this, the work that human is doing, it's the what and how bits, but the sole purpose of why we exist in those circumstances are, which are, you know, embedded in the question why, none of them have any human elements to it. The elements about how and what we can think about, and since these are simple tasks, review documents and draft documents and meetings, there must be ways that we can actually automate some of this, right? You would think. So this brings us to quick wins that are accessible to us today. If you are drafting similar documents all the time, which, as a lawyer, a good chunk of your life will be just, drafting documents. There are document automation tools for that now. If you have a bunch of documents to review, there are data analytics tools for that, or e-discovery tools for that. If you are doing something over and over again and it's very complicated, you can, something as simple as a checklist, or, you can even have softwares to automate some of the workflows. It's very easy to do that. If you need to access precise information, there are no-code automation tools that you can buy off the shelf today. And a large portion of a lawyer's time is dedicated today, at least, to managing large legal projects. These could be M&A transactions, real estate transactions, things that reach across tens of different jurisdictions, and that would require perhaps coordination of hundreds of persons and management of a number of stakeholders. And we have transaction management softwares to do that as well. Complex information flows, you can, if you need to whiteboard something, if you need to show to your client the structure, for example, corporate structure of a large holding group, you can have visualization softwares do some of that for you. So there are quick wins that we have today, but there are a number of things that, for example, you don't see here, and these are some of the I guess holy grail questions. So for example, the biggest question in legal tech is, when will we be able to tell to a client that, for example, your project A, it's going to be, it's highly likely that it will take 6 to 7 months and it will be done at this much money? Or when would we be able to say, you are currently having a litigation strategy A, this is, strategy A is the path that you are following, but if we switch to strategy B, we would be able to increase our success chance by 10%. And currently, all we do is we provide anecdotal lawyer stored experience, subjective experience to our clients. This is what you would see when a lawyer becomes senior and he or she knows extremely well around a project. So that's as a person becomes senior, he is then, or she is then able to understand and predict what can happen in a case. But that's entirely subjective and it's not necessarily backed by data. What we're trying to achieve actually in the end of the day is go to our clients and say, here's the data and here's a strategy that you should be following. This will not be here on the quick win tools table, obviously, but it's one of the things that everybody in the industry is working towards. Another thing is M365. Microsoft's M365 offering is now rolling across. It's been published some time ago, but it's now starting to be adopted by an increasing number of law firms, which also changes the way lawyers do work. And due to its inherent automation capabilities, due to Power Platform, there is a much larger capability that lawyers can automate some of their workflows. So there's a number of quick wins, but also a lot of questions that are not going to be solved from one day to the next. Which brings us to our next question. And you don't know this, but transformation of legal services is extremely hard. And probably this will be one of the first things, if you went into this area, this would be one of the first things that you figure out, because what we are essentially doing is law firms are extremely busy, and people being busy, they don't necessarily want to invest any more time in learning about a new technology. And so while this comics, it has a point, it's definitely a challenge that legal tech practitioners have to tackle every day, and create incentives for lawyers to have lawyers to listen to them and engage with them, which is lawyer engagement is one of the major obstacles for any law firm. in this space, it's also important to appreciate that it's not necessarily based on cultures or on humans. Every firm has these issues attached to, this is basically change management, which is a very difficult discourse on its own. But just to give you some idea, and this is actually one of the first teachings that when I found out, I was like, this actually makes so much sense. And if I knew this way before, I would have saved a lot of time and effort on my part. So there's a theory called diffusion of innovations theory. It's by Everett Rogers, and this has also been developed by Geoffrey Moore and this is actually Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. This is something from his book. The idea is that there are a certain portion in any community called innovators who are extremely into trying out new things, and these would be the prime people who would go out and try new things. So if you have any friends who would stay in line to get the next best thing coming out of a company like Apple, they would be considered techies in a sense. Or if they play around with Python, or if they do no code automation on their own, or if they stay up late just playing around with legal technology, they would be considered techies, and there are only 2.5% of them in any community. So this would be probably true for any law firm as well. The next group we have is visionaries, and they're only about 13.5% of any community as well. And these are the people, they're not techies. They don't play around with things as much as techies do, but they can look at something and inherently understand its potential. And together, these two groups make about 16% of people who can try out new things and who are, I guess, the first pioneers of any innovation adoption. And that is the actual challenge here. How do we identify the 16% of our communities and then empower them and give them access so that they can try things legal technology wise, and then they can adopt it, and then they can spread it to the rest of the community. This goes to, I guess, 2 slides ago, the group that the group that would be saying no thanks, we are too busy. It falls into, and I'm sorry for fiddling with my slides. Those would be the individuals here who are pragmatists and conservatives. That's the vast majority of our communities as well. People inherently, they do not want to be the first one to try new things, but most of them would not want to be the last to try things either. And in a lot of circumstances, when developing legal technology or when onboarding legal technology, the common frustration of a lot of founders, but also law firm people who are trying to have lawyers adopt new things, new ways of doing things, they become frustrated because even though they do a lot of general communications to the vast majority of the firm, they don't get as much traction in their adoption as they would like to. Which goes to show you that legal tech adoption and transformation of legal services is very difficult. And the only way we found that would be successful in this circumstance is identify and empower techies and visionaries in our offices and in our communities, so that they can then go on to talk to pragmatists and conservatives, and then skeptics who would then be encouraged by their attempts and then try these technologies out. Obviously, this is a vast simplification of the process, but this is basically the only way that you can have people adopt an innovation. And this doesn't necessarily need to be about legal technology. This can be any innovation. So I guess this is a good learning for any type of work. Like I said, resources are here if you would like to learn more about them. So we found out that we now know a bit about legal technology and why we are discussing legal technology. And we know that transitioning people from doing certain things into different ways, into more efficient ways, it's not the easiest job on earth. And we found out that there's a certain pattern to follow when it comes to diffusion of innovation. So how does this all relate to you in the end of the day? In the end of the day, this is, I'm sure some of you may remember Kodak, but for those of you who do not remember, Kodak was a company that was extremely dominant in a market that no longer matters, basically. Although their engineers were the first one to innovate, they were the first one to find out, to discover digital camera. Kodak's existing business plan did not align with using digital cameras because most of their revenues were generated from selling people traditional digital photography paper. So at the end of the day, Kodak did not transition its business from traditional cameras to digital cameras, and at the end of the day, it became almost bankrupt and had to change had to cut a lot of assets and people, and then eventually transition its business into something else. And that's not necessarily Kodak's fault. You can observe that from Nokia when it almost collapsed as well, against competition coming from BlackBerry and iPhones and Apple's iPhone. And that's not necessarily limited to these examples as well. If you read The Innovator's Dilemma from Clayton Christensen, you can see that this is not necessarily a fluke, and there's substantial evidence to suggest that this happens across all markets. And the end result when it comes to legal technology is this. So the chart that you can see, which is actually a derivative of this one, the whole point of this is to say, when it comes to clients that are currently working with law firms, there are certain types of clients, and some of them are very demanding, some of them are not as demanding as others. So let's say this green line is the least demanding customer, and most demanding customer is this other green line. The bright red line would be sustaining innovations. And by that, I mean, let's think of this as existing law firms and the way we used to do, the way we currently practice legal services. This would be the red line. As you can see, we can cover least demanding customers demands, and then most demanding customers demand. And because we are very good at what we have been doing, we can create extraordinary results, and we can manage major projects. And when it comes to legal technology, everybody's assumption is that if it's not currently overtaking a lawyer in its capabilities, if it's not overtaking a lawyer in its capabilities at this time, that it's not good enough to try at all. That's usually what would a conservative person or a pragmatist person would say. And as you know, these are the vast majority of our populations. So a lot of people think that, especially in working in law firms as well, since legal technology is not at a point where it can surpass human performance, we should not be investing in it, or we should not be thinking about it. So that is the incumbent, or you could say the dominant player's approach when it comes to legal technology. By the way, that does not say this is Baker McKenzie's approach, because it's clearly not. But that is what predominantly the approach of most lawyers, especially senior lawyers that you might talk to. Since the legal technology, the products generated by legal technology are, and by the way, I should have told you this. Let's say the maroon line is legal text results, and this is obviously a projection as well, and a very rough draft, I should say. As law firms, so let's say this line is where we are at the moment, or it could even be this line. Let's say a lawyer looks at the way the market is and say, well, legal technology is generating much suboptimal results, and it's not clearly able to surpass what I'm currently able to do. So I should not be thinking about legal technology, and I should not be investing in it. But actually, only in a few years' time, And I would argue that we are now at this stage so that legal technology is able to satisfy our least demanding customers. And this is written as customer because Clayton Christensen's graph in the next slide is using customer analogy. Legal tech is able to produce results that are aligning with our least demanding clients' requests. And it is now breaking into legal industry. And you can see that by certain alternative legal service provider firms, law firms, or alternative legal service companies that are now entering into the market. The whole discourse around this is to say that, lawyers look at how legal technology is faring right now, and they say, it's not even close to surpassing what I'm capable of doing at this time. I have a much deeper client relationship, and I know a lot more precedents, and I'm very, very good in terms of analytics, and I can take on any legal technology system at any day. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that legal technology has started eating away at the market share of legal services in general. So as this trend moves forward, day by day, legal technology and legal technology leveraging firms will be eating away at the market share of law firms that are not using legal technology. And this will go on until what we considered lawyers' monopoly. That is to say, things that lawyers are able to, things that lawyers have a unique position to advise at. It's going to get smaller and smaller. Currently, lawyers have a large area walled off as their monopoly in most jurisdictions. In most jurisdictions, you cannot be giving legal advice if you are not a lawyer. So this generates an area where lawyers can practice their legal services. But in the future, this area will become much, much smaller, and this will be reserved for elite law firms who can who have a lot of experience, and these would be the lawyers who generally advise on bet the farm level matters. And to explain that analogy a little, some matters would have low value, some would have mid-level value, some would be so critical to the welfare of the company, of the client, that it would be called a bet the farm value matter. So these, in the future, most lawyers will be operating within this area. That is to say, most elite lawyers will be operating in this area, and they will be very well paid based on the risk and the value of the matter they are working on. But for the rest of the industry, the monopoly will be gone, and most of our market share will be, most of what lawyers currently advise about will be handled by legal technology, by robots, by simple software, and perhaps through self-servicing applications and similar innovations that currently do not exist at a confidence-inspiring level. But in the future, we'll be just limited to this. So what would I do if I was graduating now? As I said, I worked for an extensive period of time as a lawyer, and I would recommend doing that to a certain degree, because practicing law as a lawyer, it has a way of it has a certain way of giving you mental discipline and perseverance, and you have to generate a certain sense of supremacy of knowledge, and you have to perfect your execution, and you have to know about network building and what it all means. So I would generally recommend legal training, not least because it's also giving you a good sense of analytical thinking as well, which is, I would say, a very, very good outcome of legal training and practice. So I would suggest, legal training, then qualifying, and then working at least 2,500 hours per year for at least 2-3 years. 2,500 can seem, daunting, but I would, and I worked pretty much for 3,000 hours per year for 2 years, and I would say that really changed the way I handle things, because when it comes to that level, you can really you have to generate efficiencies in the way that you think and work. And I still can feel how that's been helpful in my career as well. I provided some resources over the course of this presentation, but I do have some more at the end of it. And they are books on strategy, diffusion of innovation, management, and leading teams, which I would consider to be must-have skills if you are thinking about a career in legal technology. And if nothing else, you have to know about how to lead teams. I didn't provide any resources at the end of this concerning leading teams, but there are certain books like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team that are always good to pick up. Teamwork is essential, and I think it's a very rare occurrence when you see an organization working together full throttle towards a common objective. It's usually very rare to see that in any industry, in any company. The third thing I would definitely recommend is getting involved with legal tech. Particularly right now, M365 is rolling out, so there's a lot of changes that will be happening in legal technology. It's always good to understand what are the limitations of the technology currently available, so that you can position yourself with an inherent understanding of what the machines will not be able to do in 5 years time or 10 years time. So it's always good to think about what could be true in 5 years time, and then plan your way back so that you have a good career action map to go forward. And then the last one I would say, and practice strategic thinking as early as possible, because it's very difficult to get skilled at it, and the only way you can do more in it is just practice as much as possible. So getting legal tech trainings and practicing strategic thinking, I would recommend to be done as early as possible and as often as possible. And then the last one that I really cannot emphasize enough is, first of all, understand what are cognitive biases and try to read as much on them. There is a helpful list on Wikipedia, literally, but there are also good books like Thinking Fast and Slow that you can start to notice your cognitive biases and how they're actually changing the way and like decreasing the quality of the decisions that you are making. And then once you understand them and you recognize them, you can actually disarm them and do better decision making, do better strategic thinking. So it's all very foundational to how you should be operating in the future, at least in my opinion. Or don't do any of the above and absolutely forge your own way. Just because this worked out for me doesn't mean that it will work out for you. And I'm a very lucky human being, and I had a very number of fortuitous events that made me who I am right now. And perhaps that wouldn't happen the same way with you, or you would have better luck. So welcome to the Cambrian explosion. If you don't know, Cambrian explosion is the largest. Well, from it happened a couple of million years ago, but the whole point of Cambrian explosion is that was a small period of time where, because of the atmospheric conditions and the environmental conditions, a lot of new species were just generated across a very short period of time. That is exactly where we are in terms of legal technology. Because of the number of opportunities that are available, new startups, new initiatives, and new firms and law companies are being launched every day. So this is your time to, I guess, forge your own way, like I said, and good luck with that. If any questions, I would be very happy to respond over email, as I understand the Idem Foundation will be gathering them. Thank you so much for your time.